In 2025, Riot tried to get their easiest win in history. The company had so much momentum, and whether you liked Arcane or not, it was a global phenomenon, and in the center of that storm was Mel Madarda. And once she was released, the community kind of had this sigh of relief. Because after the release of Ambessa, we finally had a character that embodied that strategic weight that Arcane was all about. Riot marketed her as this high skill ceiling artillery mage. And she was the first champion you could unlock entirely through missions in the client. She was literally meant to be this bridge. The champion that would take the millions that watch Arcane and finally gave them a way to try out the hit video game League of Legends. And on paper, she was perfect. Sophisticated, visually stunning. She even came with a release skin that looked exactly like how she looked in Arcane. And she carried a kit that was supposed to be about interaction and skill expression. Somewhere buried in the tooltip of her W, Rebuttal, was a mechanic that League had never really seen before. We had wind walls, we had Brahm's shield, we had parries from Fiora. We even have spell shields from Nocturne and Sivir, going all the way back to 2010 or something. But Mel didn't just stop the projectiles, she would literally own them and send them back. But the overlooked detail didn't feel like it was just this reflection. It was the automatic target acquisition. If you threw a skill shot at Mel with her W up, it wouldn't just fire that projectile back in a straight line. It turned your own skill shot into this heat-seeking missile that would fire right back at you. We've seen them, Mel firing back a projectile and one-shotting somebody because of it. It started out as, hey, that's pretty funny, but then we all realized that that was not a ultimate skill, that was not a long cooldown ability. That was a basic ability that could do that. So within about a month, the Mel experience became the most infuriating thing in all of League of Legends. And her win rate was actually really mediocre. I think she was hovering around 46% win rate at the time. So in any other era, a champion with a 46% win rate would be receiving buffs, but instead, Mel, of course, because of this whole W experience, had a 75% ban rate. And the reason this happens, and I feel like a lot of video games go through this, which is why it's so surprising that League, after 15 years, made the same mistake. There is this game principle where if an opponent plays the game the way they're intended to play it, they shouldn't be punished by it. Because Mel, usually when I fire a skill shot, and it lands, I am rewarded. When it misses, I am punished. Just think of something as simple as a Blitzcrank. If Blitzcrank hits his hook, he's rewarded because he pulls somebody and 9 out of 10 times that's a kill. If he misses, he has a very important cooldown that is now down for, I don't know, about 10, 15 seconds. So the entire champion basically does nothing for that duration. But Mel, if you miss, you are punished. If you hit, you are also punished. She essentially became this neutralizer, and this is one of the worst things that a video game can have. Because it doesn't matter if you are a Challenger Nidalee or Lee Sin player, if you played a champion that relied on a telegraphed ability, a telegraphed projectile, you simply weren't allowed to play the game or be in the vicinity of Mel and try to even throw it in her direction. She didn't need to outplay you, she just had to exist somewhere on the map, and you knew that eventually you'd have to deal with that. For me, the experience of playing against Mel, as support, because I mostly play support, felt like playing a game of Minesweeper, where every single square off the field was a mine. If I'm playing something like Pyke, there are simply no right opportunities to do anything against her. So finally, after about a year of complaining and having the most frustrating experience of a lifetime if you go into a game against Mel, Riot has reached a breaking point. I guess they finally realized that you cannot balance frustration with numbers. You can make Mel's damage 0 and people will still ban her because of one ability that exists. So they finally made a critical decision, which brings us to patch 26.3. They didn't just nerf her though, they finally altered her identity, which is something they held off on doing. So apparently things got so bad that they decided to just rip off the band-aid and finally give her a soft rework. So it's a big change. I'm gonna summarize it because, again, there's a really big list, but basically she has no more damage immunity on her W. She no longer gets a free pass on all the damage. It's a shield now, so if you have enough burst, you can actually break through that shining golden icon that she is. And she no longer reflects projectiles that aren't targeting her. So that means if you're standing near an ally and a Brand E or a Rise E flies in, she destroys them but doesn't send them straight back to the Brand or the Rise. So this is Riot admitting that as cool as that reflect mechanic looked in the trailer, it's definitely a huge design failure for a MOBA. When you do stuff like this, when you make a neutralizer, when you make an ability this broken, eventually you run into the problem of the fantasy of the character versus the health of the game. Which does also bring me back one more time to the release of Mel, because I can't be the only one that saw Arcane and then got to the release of Mel and being really surprised that she has Reflect. Because there is this scene in Arcane where she's literally like shielding allies. I think it was the scene where she was fighting Ambessa. Spoilers, by the way, sorry about that. She was fighting Ambessa and she would put like large golden shields around her allies, and it really felt like she was going to be a support champion that would play with that mechanic, but we didn't really see any of that. She didn't even have a real shield until now with the rework. But again, she can't put them on allies, so I don't know. And if this rework goes through, which I hope it does, because he is extremely frustrating to play against, she is going to stop being that Reflect Queen, obviously, and she's going to be more like a Lux, which is something we've also seen happen with the likes of Seraphine and Sona, where all of them just kind of feel like they fall into that same category of Lux, but Lux is so popular, we are now entering the Demacia season, so who's really gonna play any of these champions when Lux still exists? And in a way, I do feel bad, because the fantasy of Mel is really cool. In Arcane, she is an extremely cool and well-written character, so from her being this type of champion, just having to be nerfed so the rest of the champion roster can breathe feels really bad. And then the additional nerf to the Q and the E, she has slower cast time, smaller radius, reduced projectile speed. It's clear that Riot is trying to put her in that Lux category of being a more skill shot based champion. Then again, the irony is she was designed initially to be this champion that was for the Arcane fans that want to play League of Legends, the Arcane fans that were looking for this more thematic and fantasy heavy click. So by making her kit harder to land and less rewarding to hold, they are making her inaccessible for the exact casual audience that she was made for. And I also have to be honest, I've not really given my personal take on this. This is just kind of what's happening with Mel Madarda in League of Legends. How did we get to this point? Why did she have to be nerfed? I think most people that play League of Legends will know that she is extremely frustrating, but design standpoint, I have always found her to be an extremely big failure. It's because of this damage immunity for her W with a reflect on top of it. She has insane unfair range, she has very low cooldowns, she also has hard CC with her E, and she can execute people. So when you have this champion that's hard to get close to, and then also has the ability to reflect and negate abilities, really, really poor design. This reflectability should have been on something that needs to be much closer. If you're gonna put it on a mage, make it on a mage that's like I don't know, that needs to actually get close, like Swain or Vex or something, like any of these champions that need to actually be close to the opponent, but still are able to get one shot if they're not careful because of that lower range. It makes zero sense to put it on something like Mel. And yeah, that 46% win rate, that was basically true for almost the entirety of Mel, except like that one patch where she was really overtuned. So the fact that they kept having to nerf and change a 45, 46% win rate champion just goes to show how much of a failure it actually is. And that's not just a competitive tax, like Azir being insane in competitive, but always having like 45% win rate in solo queue. It was the same with Rise. Mel really took this a step further and just shows that the entire kit is a complete mismatch that was really meant to be for this casual audience, and it just never landed for the other audience. And while I think the year 2025 was a little bit more mild with the Champions Day release, I think the year before that especially, Riot should be careful. So hopefully they listened, because we had Smolder's infinite scaling and Bessa's infinite mobility. It's surprising to me that Smolder has been a bit of an issue and Bessa had to be nerfed next a couple of times, but Mel is really the first one where they had to be like, okay, this is such a big problem, we have to get rid of some of her kit and really look at how we can make her less frustrating to play against. So that's all I'm here to say. I really hope that she stops being this awful champion that's just completely unplayable with a bad win rate, but still my opponents hate their life when playing against me. She's been toxic from day one, but she's an artillery mage that can't poke. She's a defensive mage that can't effectively block anymore. And she is this prestige character, Golden, one of the protagonists of Arcane, but when you load into League, you'd just rather not see her on your team or the enemy team at all. She was supposed to be this face for one of the new eras of League of Legends, heralded in by Arcane basically. But instead, I think she's become the poster child of why some abilities are fun to theory craft and think about, but are actually extremely toxic in the game, and they should probably stay in that theory craft phase of designing a champion and never in the hands of actual players.